followed by a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. During the session, if you have any queries, you can type them in the chat box. The speakers for today's webinar are Mr. Santanan Shanmugam. He is our Director CTO for Environmental Compliance, and Mr. Gaurav Thakre. He is a Senior Technical Lead for Product Compliance Management. So one last thing, we will be recording the webinar, and the recording will be shared with you along with the PDF and the PPT of the webinar. Uh, Let us wait only for 1 minute, and then we can get started with the webinar. Uh, Hi, Santa sir. I think we can get started with the webinar.
Sure. Thank you, Sharvari. Um, good day, all. Um, Thank you for uh, having some time to attend this webinar on your very busy schedule. And today we will be uh, going through the ROHs around the globe. I'll be uh, taking you through the initial few slides, and later on we will be going through. Gaurav will be taking up the presentation in detail. So I hope everybody is able to see my screen. Yeah, great. Thank you. So we will start with the agenda. Yeah. So today's agenda is we are going to have a look on the introduction and introduction on iLenses, say what we do and what we offer, and what the solution that we have. And we will directly moving from there, we will be directly moving into the ROHS overview, and then we will be going through each and every ROHs around the globe, say for each region. And at last, we will see the differences and comparison of all these different ROHs regions. Say what are the differences and what is same across. Yeah. So what is iLenses? So we are an innovative and comprehensive engineering service provider with say digital services and solutions. And we have two different business divisions, majorly services and solutions. In services, we have engineering and immersive technology, and on the solutions, um, we have environmental compliance and the component obsolescence solutions that we provide. There are two different modules on the same platform, and our locations. Say we are headquartered in Hyderabad, India, and we have offices in Coimbatore, which is in the down south of India, and we have offices in Frankfurt, Germany, and Aurora, Illinois, US. And we are around somewhere close to 400 plus people. Currently, we are majorly into engineering services, uh, and most of them are located in India. We are an ISO 9001 2015 and certified company, and we have ISO 13485 certified because we majorly work with medical devices and the laboratory equipments. So we do support design services from end to end. And these are some of our major customers like Thermo Fisher, Tomco CO2, Richard Wolf, Horiba, Malvern, Southworth. And this is our Islands' head office, which is located in Hyderabad. So what services that we offer? So here, um, uh, are you able to, is it audible? Sorry, someone has messaged. Is
I
it
can
audible?
I can hear
Yes,
you,
yes,
Sam.
you're
Is
audible.
it clear? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. So here are some of our offerings. Say product in the product environmental compliance. Say when we look at here, say the major concerns and challenges that what the industry faces, say is the getting the data from the suppliers. So we start with the data collection for all different regions for different regulations and directives, and we support in, say we have a team of expertise who would be able to help supporting collecting the data from the suppliers around the globe, and we validate the data that what we receive, and we standardize the data, and we synthesize the data, and we put it in our software tool, ILNSS compliance management and ILNSS obsolescence management, where we put the data, and we do the risk assessment for the products and components which do not have enough data from the suppliers. And for the new regulatory requirements, we keep updating the data, and we look for the new regulatory requirements, upcoming regulatory requirements, and we proactively do the check and making sure that we are not missing any loopholes in the regulation area. So, and being this is continuously, it's a continuous requirement, and new regulatory requirements are keep popping up. So we do the continuous monitoring across all regulations. So in fact, if you look at REACH, every 6 months there is going to be an updated candidate list. We will be updating every 6 months as and when there is a new release that comes from that is getting released from ECA. So these are some of the challenges. So I'm not taking more time. So we will go to the next slide. Say some of the key features of our tool. Say where you can import the bill of material, say which we receive from the customer, and we synthesize the data and we will process it in the tool. And say you can have a compliance dashboard where you can see the results of the imported data as and when you import it. So yeah, based on the availability of data and the presence of data in our system, we would be able to share the dashboard, so you can have a quick look at, say, where do you stand at the current instance. And we store all the data, whatever we collect from the suppliers, into the database, and we do check the regulatory requirements, as I said, say the latest regulatory software updates and requirements based on the customer needs, we would be able to customize as well. And the skip submission can be done from the tool itself, like creating the skip dossier and submitting to ECA and getting the skip number. Uh, So everything can be processed through our iLenses compliance management tool. And for the components which we do not have uh, any data, and with some material specification, we should be able to do the part risk assessment, and we would be able to place it in, say, high, low, medium risk, and we would be able to uh, set that flag whether it is no risk, low risk, or high risk in our tool, and we can uh, based on the material availability, and we can set that, we can create a certificate internally, and we can say that, say, whether that part is certified or not certified. We can do a self certification. So, and overall, we can create a compliance report based on the product or based on the bill of material. We can generate the compliance reports, and we can take it for further analysis internally. And when we look at, say, say, what are the different ROHs, and say which region has ROHs requirements. These are the overall ROHs requirement which we can see. So this is around the globe. Um, and we are going to focus only few of them in this. Say we may not be able to cover all as of now. So for today's session, we will be covering around 10 uh, ROHS regions, want the requirements from each region, what they look for. So these are the highlighted green ones which we are going to look at for today's session, and Gaurav will be taking on with through all these session. So Gaurav, I hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Santha. Okay, good morning, good evening, to everyone, wherever you guys are located. So, as Santha mentioned, we'll be trying to cover most of the regulations in this session, and we'll start with the EU ROHS updates, which is basically the main regulation, and it's just a history of. You can hear me, Santha? Just to check. Everybody?
Yes, Gaurav. Yeah, it's clear, clear
Thank
and
you.
loud. Yeah.
So coming back to ROHS, this slide has some brief intro on how the ROHS started and what are the updates for a period of time. So as you all know, ROHS being a directive which started as 2002-95 EC, and it is basically to restrict the hazardous substances mainly in electronic and electrical products. So coming back to the scope of the regulation was defined to the electrical electronic equipment with the voltage, the AC current with limited to 1000 and DC not higher than 1500 volts, and the cables with a voltage limited to 250 volts. Then the ROHS 2, which was updated back in 2011-65 EU, which was basically applied to the different product categories, and uh, it started with original 8 categories and added medical devices since back in 2014. And the requirement for the C marking was included. Basically, the ROHS directive is also now a C marking directive. So what does it mean? Like if you have to place a C mark on the product, and your product is also in the scope of ROHS, which is one of the directive. So to place a C marking, it also need to meet the requirements of ROHS. So in terms of that, it also has a technical documentation requirements as per EN 50581 standard, which is the 2012 is basically the old version of the standard. So, and the document has to be maintained for 10 years. So we have one slide in the deck today for the standard 50581. We will go through it when to understand what are the high level requirements of the standard. For ROHS 3, which 2015 X63, which added a 4 substances, and it went to be effective for the different product categories, like for the category 8, which is the medical devices, category 9, which is the monitoring and control equipments, including the industrial products. And it started back in 2021, July 2021. It was effective. Like the 4 substances, mainly the phthalates were added, and those are need to be compliant. The products needs to be compliant with the 10 substances, the 10 restricted substances now. And similarly, the legal dates of the import date after July 2019, whatever the stock in place has to compliant, and then all the spares also has to be compliant after 2019. So product categories, we had these product categories initially when the ROHS started, because the product category is basically defined as when the ROHS started initially, it came up with a few product categories, and then slowly it got added the medical products, then added 9 category and the 10 category. And finally, then it was added with the all other electronic equipment which are not covered. So basically the summary of this thing is everything which is electronic product. Either it was not covered earlier, it is now in the scope of ROHS directive. And this directive does not apply to few of the product families or product types which are mainly being used in the given application, which is like space equipment, arms, ammunition, all those things what you see listed here. Which are the restricted substances? So you start with a list like lead, cadmium, mercury, hexavalent, chromium, PBB, PBD, and the 4 phthalates at the last. So 6 substances, the initial 6 substances were restricted as a part of ROHS 2, and they were all restricted. All the 10 substances restricted in the limit of 0.1%, which is basically 1000 ppm parts per million, except cadmium, which is 0.01%, that is 100 ppm. And that is being measured at homogeneous level of the product. So when you say homogeneous level, it's not an article level. So that is the difference between the REACH and ROHS. In REACH, the concentration or the threshold is measured at article level, and in ROHS, it is being measured at homogeneous level. And these are the main uses of the substance. The restricted substance has been found in the many application, and over a period of time, these are being removed slowly, but still there are applications which uses mostly lead what we see, and few times cadmium, and is being used in many electronic components. And because of exemption, those are still being used, and over a period of time, the exemption may get expired, and manufacturer has to check for the alternate substance to replace. So all this, I'm not going through all the applications where being used, but the substances which restricted in ROHS 2, the initial 6 substances, and the substance restricted in other ROHS regulations, which we are going to see in the next coming slide, are same, are mostly similar. So even you say about China ROHS, it restricts initial 6 substances, and it is going to expand phthalates soon. So the list with which ROHS 3 and China ROHS 3 will be similar. So it is easy, or it has some overlapping when it comes to the regulation in terms of the restricted substances. Yes, there are some differences which we will see in the coming slides. Exemption, what does exemption means? Like specifically, if there is some substance being used in the for a particular application, the application is critical, or there is no alternate, like it's a medical products and there is no alternate in the industry. So there is some timeline, or there is some extension is given to the manufacturer to comply. In short, it's like the exemptions help manufacturers to comply to the extended period till the exemption valid, and the exemption are being renewed over frequently, or of like few years. After few years, it is are being reviewed. And if the manufacturers or the companies think that they don't have an alternate still found for the given application, they can again request for renewal, and the renewal application will be reviewed by the ICA committee, and they will be either approving the renewal based on the market analysis, or rejecting it. If the renewal of the exemption get rejected, the components which are using the exemptions will get ROHS non-compliant. So basically, if you are using any component in the product which has exemptions being used, it is important to monitor the exemption expiry dates, because if the exemption is expired, the component will change the status from non-compliant with exemptions to non-compliant. So exemptions list there are two types of exemption list, which is part of directives Annexure 3 and Annexure 4. Annexure 3 applies to product categories 1 to 11, while the Annexure 4 applies to 8 and 9. So which are the category 1 to 11, except 8 and 9, 8 and 9, 8 is basically the medical products and 9 is basically monitoring and control equipments. So Annexure 4 is only specifically, but 3 applies to all categories. And exemption updates, what are the exemption updates which we are expecting? Several exemptions, which you see 6A, 16B, 16B, 26C, 7A, 7C1. These are review for the renewal, and we soon get updates on the renewal for the exemption. And mostly the exemptions belong to lead being used in a different applications. New exemptions being added to Annexure 4, like exemption 848, and new exemption request also in discussion for Annexure 3, which is 9A3. So these are few exemptions also being planned as a part of next ROHS updates, which is basically ROHS 4, we can say, right? So the next slide is about EN 50581 standard, which we referred in the earlier slide, which is basically guides the technical documentation requirements for the manufacturer to comply with the manufacturer to comply with technical file documentation. So it is to build a supplier and material confidence assessment. So this is a snapshot on the right side is about the content of technical file. So if you see the clauses 4.3.2, 4.3.3, 4.3.4. So this is based on the EN 50521 standard. So as you know, ROHS is a CE marking directive, and CE marking has a technical documentation requirement. So you may have your product being falling into scope of multiple directive, like the supply equipment directive, EMC directive, LVD directive, or there are machinery directive. There are different directives. Apart from that, if it is falling also under the ROHS directive, then the technical documentation has to include documents for all these requirements for all the directives. So if your product is falling in the EMC and LVD, it has to include the documentation for both the directive requirements. So if you see in general, basically the documentation high level is same what we have for other directives, apart from few differences in terms of supply declaration and contractual agreements, or basically the material declaration and analytical test results. So supplier and material confidence assessment, what you see in 4.3.2. So it is important, like for a manufacturer or any company selling the products into EU, to have a technical documentation to comply with EN 50581 requirement as a evidence of compliance. And basically, when you have a CE marking directives, a self declaration, which should include the ROHS also as a part of requirement. What are the EU ROHS updates? We have update like the two new substances are going to be added in the ROHS. So the proposal was originally planned back in last year, end of 2022, to be effective from 2024. However, it is being delayed until Q2 2023. So the substances, which is MCCP and TBBPA. So the gas number. So where those are being used, mostly the MCCP is used in the flame retardant and plasticizer in flexible plastic rubbers, other polymers, and it has a wide range of applications in the industry. Similarly, TBBPA is also used as a epoxy resin in the production of epoxy resin, and it has a wide application in the sealants, adhesives, packaging. So, for example, housing in ABS plastic. And the restriction will put to threshold at a 0.1% for both the substances. So this is the updates which we are expecting Q2 2023 this year. And we are not sure about the enforcement date may change, which earlier was expected in 2024. Also part of the updates, we are also expecting a new exemption which we discussed in the earlier slide, will be also added, and updates in the few exemptions will be there as a part of the upcoming ROHS directive. Yeah, okay. We have a quick poll here to understand the challenges in terms of ROHS being faced by you, most of you guys. Maybe, Sharvi, if you can help to initiate the poll. Sharvi, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
launching the poll. Just a
Yeah.
second.
Okay, so maybe, yeah.
Are you able to see the poll?
Yeah, I can see that. So the question is, what are the main challenges being faced in compliance with ROHS requirements for your products? So the first option is the no compliance regulation expertise. So it's basically understanding of the regulation and compliance with all the requirements, starting from the documentation, labeling, marking for the different ROHs around the world. Second is about challenges with supply data collection, because you may have a lot of suppliers to connect with. And the huge number of products and components. Third option is the compliance data management, reporting challenges. If you are not using a software, you are using like a Excel based or the um, approach where you are storing the documents locally. So, or the fourth option, which is all of the above. I think the poll screen, the poll is live. If you want to.
Maximum people have replied that they face challenge with data collection from the supplier.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I guess you can see 9% of the challenges with the understanding regulation, 46% with the supplier working with supply data collection, and then 23% for both. So all of the above also like 23% and around 22%, which is for I think you still are using some. There's no software. You guys are using some Excels on managing the data locally. Okay, so that's a good data. So going back to the next slide about UK ROHS. So as you know, like after Brexit, there was an exit of UK from formal exit of UK from the European Union on 31st December, and that leads to UK to adopt its own directive, like a UK ROHS. So UK ROHS is basically already in force, which is applicable from 1st Jan 21. But it started with all of the requirements. Mostly it has took all the requirement initially as a part of UROHS. So it's similar to UROHS when it started, and it has the same 11 product categories and 10 restricted substances, as you see in the UROHS. Initial EU exemptions list is valid till December 2020. So initial exemption were carried forward to UK ROHS, and then the new exemptions list will be put in place by the UK new authority for UK ROHS, and there'll be new exemptions will be coming as a part of UK ROHS. But rest of the things, if you see, are same. So the exemptions process may differ when it comes to UK ROHS. And when we say UK, EU, there is a C marking as a mandatory requirement. But in terms of UK, it will be a UK CA mark as a mandatory requirement on the product and packaging when the product has to be placed in GB, Great Britain. Okay. So it has been applicable, the marking has been applicable from 2025, Jan 2025, which is, I think it is postponed for a couple of years, which it was supposed to be applicable from this year, but it's already been postponed to 2 years. So UK CA mark has to be applicable, and along with that, UK ROHS has to be compliance has to be there for UK ROHS. China ROHS and updates on China ROHS. So already the China ROHS, which has 6 substances like UROHS 2, be restricted, but it is going to add 4 new substances which are phthalates, which will be similar to EU ROHS 3, the current ROHS directive, after the 4 substances being added, but it is not still enforced, which is expected to be this year. So products should meet the labeling requirements. So there is labeling requirements as a part of China ROHS, the China ROHS regulation, and the requirements are basically it has to have, like if you see in the slide, there are two. There are orange circle with the number of years inside it. So it is basically, and there is another label with green and inside E. So if the product does not have any of the restricted ROHS substances, then it can be marked with the green label. And if the product or component does have at least one of the substances above the threshold of value, like suppose there's a lead above the threshold, which is 0.1% or 1000 ppm, then it has to be marked with, it has to have marked with this label. And inside this, if you see some digits like 5, 7, 10, 25, 50, it is nothing but a number of years. So number of years the product is safe to use. So this is something been defined, has to be defined by the manufacturer, depending on the product, and they have to put the number of years along with the label has to be put. So second one is basically the table. What you see in the right side may not be visible, but what does table contains? It contains about the component types here, and then on the horizontally, if you see the substances like a lead, mercury, and all the 6 substances, and it has a cross mark, and it has to basically tell that if this substance is there in this component or not. So that is basically the ROHS table has to be put on to say that this substance is present, and there has to be a marking against those substance next to the given component. So, and basically the table has to be in the Chinese language. That is important. So this is all about the China ROHS, and if the product is placed in the China market, and important to comply with the requirements and also to monitor the upcoming changes. UAE ROHS will be going through the UAE ROHS requirements. So UAE ROHS regulation came into force with preliminary requirements back into Jan 2018. And the scope covers basically all the EEE product categories, which are same 11 product categories what we've seen in the earlier slide as a part of EU ROHS directive. So which are the substances being restricted as a part of UAE ROHS? It's a similar to UROHS, the 10 substances. And the restriction of the 4 substances, like earlier it was 6 substances. So last year, the 4 phthalates were added in the scope of UAE ROHS requirements. And what is the exemption? What is the difference with the exemption? Similar to the Annexure 3 and 4 exemptions, what we see in the back earlier slide, it's the same. Only the difference is there in the numbering. What we see in ROHS, we call as the 6A, 7C. So the difference in the numbering and the expiration dates. There are no expiration dates basically when it comes to UAE ROHS. So those are difference in the exemption. And there are requirements in terms of documentation and marking. What you see that there are 2 different the requirements. One is the ECAP and one is the EQM license, ECAM certification and EQM license. So there's the authorities which provide the licensing. In the next slide, I have the details like ECAS is nothing but Emirates Conformity Assessment System, and EQM is Emirates Quality Mark Scheme. So what's the difference between 2? So in ECAS, the risk assessment to be submitted in case the full product assessment for RHS is not completed. So it's basically the risk assessment documentation has to be submitted, and applicant issued a declaration of compliance, including only critical components. So may not require to do for complete product, only for critical components to issue a declaration of compliance. Whereas you see in the EQM, Emirates Quality Mark, applicant issue a declaration of conformity, and the assessment has to be done for as per the standard. So for all the parts. Here it's like only for critical component can be done, but here it has to follow standard and has to done for all the parts. Applicants submit full test report and of the complete product available. Otherwise, test report for at least 3 critical components. And here the ESMA or the agents, they verify and then issue the certificate. So it is basically with the approval of ESMA and review by the body, ESMA body, to provide the certificate. So here the ESMA verifies the and issue certificate validity 1 year, here the validity 3 years. So you see the different marks. This is the ECAS mark and this is the EQM mark, which is basically the difference between the two. Coming back to SASO ROHS, SASO ROHS is nothing but the ROHS requirements applicable in the Saudi, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia mainly. The technical documentation, the regulation was first drafted back in 9th July 21 by the Saudi Standard Metrology and Quality Organization, which we called in short as SASO. So the SASO ROHS regulation covers below product types, and you see the implementation dates. So these implementation dates were earlier planned to start from Jan 22, but it was delayed by 6 months back earlier into Jan because of some reasons. So it is started back in last year, which is 4th July. If you see for household appliances, small household appliances, and it started from 4th July. Then large household appliances started from 2nd October. So these are the products getting covered into small household appliances, food processing machine, juicer, toaster, everything. And then large is like refrigerator, air conditioner, dishwashers, so, like that. Telecom and IT appliances will start from December last year, 31st December, mainly from this year itself. So it has a products like IT related equipments, laptop printers, mainframes, etc. Lightning equipment started this year, 31st March. So recently, a month back. So it has all the lighting equipment like fluorescent lamps and the lighting products. Electronic equipment started from, it will be going to start from June, end of June, it's going to start, and it will be covering sewing machine tools for welding. So it covers some of the industrial equipment as well. So if you see mostly the turning equipment, turning, milling, sanding, grinding. So most of the mechanical machines being covered. Toys and other products, which is the toys are being also covered from September 23, and monitoring control products like the temperature monitor, pressure monitor, like thermostats, smoke detectors, everything will be getting covered from the December 23. So we made from next year, everything, all these things product will be in the scope by end of this year. So this is the scope of the SASO regulation, which is being enforced. And there are some updates released last year as a part of this particular release, which you see here. So they have released some updates which talk about updates in the existing articles been amended, like Article 5.2 is stating the manufacturer. It will add a requirement for the manufacturer or legal representative of the manufacturer must issue the supply declaration of conformity before the products are submitted to Saudi market. So like if you know in the CE marking, there is a mandatory requirement of cert declaration. Similar to that, there has to be a declaration from the supplier or the legal representative located in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has to put a cert declaration while putting the products in the market. Yeah, give me 1 second. Yeah, so next is about next update is about technical file documentation, which was not earlier, it's not included. So if you see like supplier, manufacturer, declaration of conformity accordance with the form annexure 4. So there is a basically defined format is given in the annexure 4. So they had to provide a declaration as per that. This assessment document has to be also present, and necessary warning and caution and manual for safe and sound operation and use of the product has to be provided. So inclusion in the annexure 1B. So there is a added one inclusion, like new list of equipment exempted from SASO ROHS. So basically there are certain control and monitoring equipment have been included in the scope of excluded products. So there are some products in the control equipment category, which are excluded and which are added in this particular Annexure 1B of the SASO regulation amendment. So these are some updates on the Saudi ROHS, which is SASO ROHS, and when we go back to next one, which is Japan ROHS. Japan ROHS, also called as a JMOS, basically has in industry standard, the JIC standard, what you refer here with the 2021 edition, and with the mandatory material declaration requirements applicable from back in 2006 it started. The category of the products it included in the scope, like personal computer unit type, air conditioner, television set, refrigerator, washing machine, floor dryers, and wire microwaves. So mostly the household equipment, small and large household equipments included. It also restricts the 6 substances like you see in the China ROHS or in EU ROHS 2 is also restricted the similar 6 substances. So there are exemption. There is a different list of exemptions which is available in the Japan ROHS. It is not similar to EU ROHS. It is a little bit different. So we have the list we can share with you as well if required. So that has to be followed when complying with Japan ROHS regulation. So there are some marking requirements in the Japan ROHS. There is a green mark and an orange mark. So when to have a green mark. So the JMOS called to have a green mark when the product meet the requirements of compliance. Basically, when there is no ROHS substances present above the threshold, or also if the product is compliant using exemption, this mark with the green colored mark with the G inside, it has to be put in the product. Orange mark with the orange color and this particular what you see has to be put on the product in case if there is any substance which is present above the threshold in the product. What is the documentation requirement in the Japan ROHS? If products have restricted substance above threshold or even exemption applicable, then manufacturer need to disclose the presence of restricted substances. So similar to you see in the China ROHS, and there is a table what you see in the bottom right. So if you have any of the substances, like in this example, you see there is lead is present in the mounting substrate in the equipment with the television receiver. So it manufacturers to put like inside which particular component the given substance which is lead is present above the threshold. So this table has to be put, and this is in English just for understanding, but this table has to be put in Japanese language, and this is as per the JIS standard to follow. So this is about the marking, documentation, and the labeling requirements to be followed for Japan ROHS. We have one slide on South Korea ROHS. It's also called as Korea ROHS. So the Act of Resource Recycling of electronic equipment and vehicles passed back in the 2007 and then entered into force 2008. It was having some amendments approved back in 2020. So what are the changes in the Korea ROHS legislation we can see here? So earlier to apply to these products like TV, refrigerator, mobile devices, washer, personal computers, so mostly the household products. So since Jan 21, like a couple of years back, it has expanded the scope with 23 new product types. What you see here, like starting from the GPS navigation, vending machine, wired and wireless router. So the scope had expanded from few products to many products, if you see, and there are like mostly all the household equipments are covered along with few non-household equipment as well, like treadmills, you see scanners. So it can be industrial products also and vending machines. So the scope is being increased for the Korea ROHS with the new product categories. What are the substance restricted? Earlier, it was having 6 substances been restricted like ROHS 2, and recently there are 4 new phthalates been be added back in 2021. So now 10 substances like ROHS 3 has to be complied. Korea ROHS exemption given in Annexure 2. So there is a annexure. There are exemption given for Korea ROHS. There are exemption applicable, and the list of exemption is available in the Annexure 2 of the legislation. And what is the marking or labeling requirements? So self-declaration of compliance and no marking or labeling requirements. So manufacturer has to have a self-declaration to comply with the Korea ROHS when the product is being put into Korea market. Yeah, coming back to India ROHS, so it basically took effect from May 2020, 2014, and it was started with the three product categories: large appliances, computing and communication equipment, television sets. So all the products, including spare parts in the scope listed, are exempted. So it doesn't have a major updates, but recently there were updates in the India ROHS specific to the exemption list. So the exemption currently is similar to EROHS, but recently there is update in the exemption. So it is also restricted to 6 substances to see in the EROHS 2, and it requires self-declaration, and as such there is no specific marking and labeling requirements. Next slide we have on the Singapore ROHS, and it is basically the Singapore ROHS is also called as HG ROHS, which became a law since 1st June 2017 by the Singapore Ministry of Environment and Water Resources, and it started with the 3 electronic product categories: refrigerator, washing machine, air conditioner, portable computers, mobiles, and the TVs. So this is about the Singapore ROHS, and exemptions are same, substances are same, and there is a ROHS declaration of confirmation will be submitted to the Singapore Environmental Agency when the product is compliant with the Singapore ROHS, and the technical documentation as per EN 50581 it has to be 50581. Just a typo here. It's the same standard what we've seen earlier. So it's a BS copy of EN standard. There are no marking or labeling requirements here. Coming back to, I guess, the last slide on the regulation, which is Vietnam ROHS. So Vietnam ROHS, as per the circular back, the circular number is like in the 2011. It is came into effect in 2012, and it just covers the product categories. What you see: large appliances, small appliances, commercial technology and equipments, then consumer products. So these equipments, whatever the scope, resembles with URHS product category 1 to 7 and 10. So you see everything is scope except category 8 and 9, which is basically medical products and monitoring and control equipments. It restricts the same 6 substances, which is in ROHS 2. Exemptions are similar, and companies need to provide ROHS compliant document on its website, document or packaging when they are complying with the ROHS requirement. And there is no such marking requirement. It's basically the information has to be given to the consumers or the users on the different way, like website documentation, the compliance. So there are some updates in the Vietnam ROHS as well, which will go into effect in the future, which is mostly from the 2026. So recently, last year, the Ministry of Industry and Trade of Vietnam has declared a draft circular to have a proposed changes, which is like to inclusion of the 2 product categories which were missing earlier. Which one is the monitoring instrument will be included in IT and telecom equipments will be included in the scope of the Vietnam ROHS. It will have a submission of declaration of conformity to the Vietnam authority will be mandatory going forward after 2020, starting from 2026. Display of conformity logo will also follow. So these are the some updates coming to Vietnam ROHS legislation. Yeah, so I guess yeah, the last slide here for questions.
We have a question where they want to know if IEC 62474 early in PPT is IEC a voluntary standard?
Yes.
I
So yeah, IC 62474, what you have referred, it has a similar documentation approach, what you see in the IPC standard 1752A. And it is followed by few industries or few companies, but it's not a mandatory as such part of any legislation as such.
we have another question. What about India ROHS?
I think we have covered one slide on India ROHS. If you have any specific question, you can post us part of India ROHS. So as the part of current scope, yes, medical devices is not there. So and in India ROHS, there are no major updates, as I mentioned, apart from some exemption updates. And also part of reinforcement, or when we say the penalties, also there are no such on-ground enforcement what we noted. is basically the documentation is important, but as such, yeah, so the medical devices is basically is not in the scope as of now.
We had one more question, like what is risk-based assessment, which was asked earlier.
Yeah, sure. Um, So risk-based assessment is nothing but is a material-based assessment. So basically, if you know the material of the component, so what happens like when you see in the polls, most of the people noted that they have challenges working with the supplier in terms of data collection. So you may have a local supplier, you may have product which is locally manufactured, like you may have some hardware components, metal products, or the products which like metal alloys, you may not have a standard manufacturer for it. So there are challenges when you connect with the supplier and ask for data. They may not have the details readily available, or even they send the details. I'm not sure how to trust those data because it's basically they send it everything compliant just to uh, for the sake of replying to your query. So when it comes to that, we take care approach like most of the companies when they give a requirement, there is a also requirement of materials to use. So we use the material to do the risk assessment and study the material data and accordingly analyze the risk for the ROHS and other regulations under low risk, high risk like that.
And adding to it, say based on where it is used, like say for example, if it is in wires, like say if it requires a fire retardant material is being used, say based on the commodity also we will segregate it. So those things, say whatever I'm talking about, like say based on the commodities, say we used to derive those things and we will be adding it into the system. Um, so there will be an automated system. We are working on it, which is going to come up in the near future. Yeah.
What is a testing methodology in ROHS? How can we authenticate the declaration by suppliers and how to maintain documents? Specifically for Indian ROHS, what documentation is required?
Yeah, I think there is some documentation as a part of declaration required. Maybe I think that question will take, maybe we can answer you two separately in terms of
Sure,
some
sure.
type of specific documentation you can send it to you.
Okay, okay. And can you explain the procedure for making product reach compliance?
Okay, so that's a complex question. When it's coming to breach compliance, so what type of product you are saying about? It's a complex product. When I say complex product, you may have a different components in it. So you may have a bill of material where you may be using PCB, you may be having mechanical components, you have screws, nut, and bolts. So you have to study the compliance of the all the components, and then only you can derive compliance of your complete product for the reach. So that is important. Like you have to collect data for each and every component in the product, and to check for reach compliance, then only you can declare for your complete product. But there is a difference on the reach and ROHS regulation. So we have one more question on that one. Maybe I'll share my slide. If any questions we have, because we have few questions before the start of the webinar we received. Any other question we have, Sharvari, in the chat window?
What do you mean by compliance at homogeneous level?
Okay, so what is meant by homogeneous level is basically any particular material which has the same composition throughout the material. So it's basically you take an example of metal, like a metal sheet. So if you measure the composition of metal sheet at any point or any end, you will have the same composition throughout the metal sheet. It may not be something like you have a different composition at one end, a different at the other end. So when the metal rolling sheet is there, it will have same composition. It is we call it a homogeneous material. Heterogeneous material is something which the two materials are being joined together with a mechanical joint or some type of welding joint. That is heterogeneous material. So ROHS, the composition are measured at homogeneous level, and you reach the compositions, sorry, the compliance is being checked at article level.
Okay. Okay. Can EU ROHS compliance cover compliance for other countries as well? Most suppliers can only offer this.
Yeah, so basically this is the same question, what I'm showing my window, which we received before the start of the webinar. Does
Mm-hmm.
compliance with EU ROHS ensure compliance with all global ROHS restriction? Uh, it's partly yes, partly no, because the common thing is about the substances being restricted. What we see in the earlier slide, like sometimes there are 6 substances which are common with UROHS 2 and 10 substances also in some of the regulations, right? Like China ROHS is having the same 6 substances which were in the ROHS China UROHS 2, and same is for all the regulations. So if you know that okay, the given component from a supplier is compliant with these 6 substances, so basically, it's compliant for the 6 substances for all the related other ROHS regulation. You don't need to ask him again, okay, is it compliant for China ROHS as well, or it is compliant for Japan ROHS as well? Because the response will not differ. It's compliant with your just 6 substances, same substances are in the regulations. It's compliant with those substances. But the difference will be if there is an exemption difference that has to be checked because some regulations don't have your just registration don't have exemptions, some have. So if there has been exemption being used, then has to be checked with each regulation separately. And also the exemption list keep on changing. That has to be monitored. The product categories in the scope also differs based on few regulations. So as a question was there in the India ROHS, the medical device in scope. So in our EU ROHS it is there. So you may have a different country specific legislation, the scope may be different. So those are the things has to be checked.
One last question. Is it compulsory to test for ROHS or self-declaration is sufficient?
Yeah, so that is based on the legislation what we see. So if you're asking question in terms of UROHS, testing is not mandatory. So based on supply declarations or the or with what we see in the risk-based assessment approach, and you can also draft a self-declaration which has been signed by the given authority from the organization, and that is sufficient to make to provide evidence, and also the technical file documentation has to be there.
Adding to it, it depends on the article that what you are looking at.
Yeah. Another question what we received before, and we used to receive some question like if you are using a product which is having a non-compliant components, or if you are having product non-compliant part, can you sell those in Europe? So when I say like non-compliant, I understand there are some components inside the given product which have at least one of the ROHS substances above the threshold value. So only the deadlines of all the 10 substances to comply has been passed back in 2021, July 2021 for all the product categories. So now there is no such validity that you can still use it. So you have to use only compliant components for which is compliant with all the 10 restricted substances when you are placing the product in Europe. There are no only you can use the exemption. If you have an exemption, then you can still put the product or the components in the Europe. But if it is non-compliant, then basically you need to replace the components with the compliant components. Okay, so I think that's the last question we have. Any other things we have, Sharwari?
One more thing is there. Like, has the list increased for Indian ROHS? Is the list of products increased after November 2022?
Yeah, so I think we have a couple of questions on India roaches. Maybe you can send us an email. We can separately reply you because if you want a specific list, we can send it to you that one through the email.
Okay, okay, sure, sure. And I have a quick poll for all the participants, which I will be launching. You can answer it quickly. Just a second. And, are we done with the webinar, Gaurav?
Yeah. And I think we are done with that. Thank you.
Okay.
Mm,
So
we
I
are
would
already overboarding. Yeah.
yes, yes. I would like to thank Santa and Gaurav for valuable insights on ROHS, and a very special thanks to all the attendees. Hope you have learned something new today. I will be sharing the recording of this webinar as well as the PPT very soon. And if we have missed out on any questions, we will be personally replying to those questions. I have your mail IDs. And if any question come to your mind, you can just simply email me. You have my email ID. And we are going to plan webinar soon. Hope to meet you again.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Thanks
all.
to
Thank
join.
Thank you
you.
all. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.